Welcome back to Hardball. This was the week the culture wars exploded on television. Roseanne Barr, of course, an outspoken supporter of President Trump, was fired by ABC Tuesday after sending a racist tweet about a former senior advisor to Barack Obama, Barry Jarrett. Well, Barr apologized, but also suggests there was a political double standard at work to her firing. Then on Wednesday, that would be the next day, late-night host Samantha B used a vulgar word, I think we can all agree on that, to describe Ivanka Trump during a segment criticizing the White House policy on migrant children. Here goes, a bit of it with a bleep in it.
Do something about your dad's immigration practices, you feckless c***. He listens to you.
Well, B apologized the next day. TBS, which airs her show, issued its own apologies, but took no action beyond that. Today, Donald Trump tweeted, "Why aren't they firing no-talent Samantha B for the horrible language used on her low-rating show? A total double standard." And it was a very different reaction than he had early in the week to the news that ABC had canceled Roseanne. Trump never said anything about Barr's tweet, but he took issue with the fact that the chairman of Disney personally reached out to Valerie Jarrett to apologize. Trump wrote, "Gee, he never called President Donald J. Trump." That's probably like, isn't this Julius Caesar referring to yourself in the third person? He never called President Donald J. Trump to apologize for the horrible statements made and said about me on ABC. Maybe I just didn't get the call. Well, from where I'm joined by Liz Winstead, co-creator of The Daily Show, Ted Johnson, senior editor of Variety, Sophia Nelson, a former House Republican Committee counsel and a contributor to NBC Think. That's where all our brains get together to write stuff. Liz, you've been in the business. It seems to me that writing for comedy and standing up in front of a brick wall or on television, you have to be like a race driver. You got to race as fast as you can but not get killed, which is a tricky bit of business every night of your life, and sometimes you get killed.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it. What did you make about the first one, Roseanne Barr? Was that a firing offense from your perspective by ABC? Was it fair that she was knocked out of a comeback career?
Yeah, totally fair. I mean, when you literally, out of thin air, decide to use something that has been a symbol of dehumanizing imagery and a way to literally make black folks lesser than everyone else.
A lesser species, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When you put that out there, and that's just horrifying enough. But when ABC and Roseanne were all doubling down on, they wanted to do this reboot of Roseanne to really talk about not the racist imagery that so many liberals had been putting forth, but to really talk about the disenfranchised, economically vulnerable voters. You know what? And then this spews out. It falls in the face of every single reason they said they wanted to reboot the show in the first place.
Yeah, it's a worst-case scenario for everybody. Sophia, your thought about it, we're going to work our way through this. What about Samantha? What about Roseanne Barr? Should she have been canned?
Absolutely, she should have been canned. And if we're doing a comparison contrast to Samantha,
well, let's get to that first. I want to get you on the record here. Ted, what do you think is this? Was this seen as fair by the world, by you? Firing of Roseanne Barr. She's gone now. No more comebacks, probably.
Sure. I mean, I immediately thought, bizarrely enough, of going back 30 years to Jimmy the Greek. He said some
They don't have the
comments.
He was very.
Yeah.
He was I think he had 3 or 4 glasses of wine at Duke Zever's for lunch. But then he said he talked about why African Americans don't get these coaching jobs. He said they don't have. This isn't even English. They don't have the necessaries. You know. I mean, he was obviously making a statement about IQ and all, but it was awful, and he was finished. And then it was of course Howard Cosell, who was great in so many ways, and I think a good guy who made that comment about a monkey too. And I think there's something in the brain with some of these people.
Well, and my point is, it's nothing new that you get fired for saying racist comments.
But people always do. Anyway, in a statement yesterday, the president's spokesperson, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, wrote, "The language used by," here we are, the second case, "Samantha B. last night is vile and vicious. The collective silence by the left and its media allies is appalling." Now, back to you, Liz. The silence of the lambs, in this case, President Trump, was overwhelmingly silent. It was deafening, the silence. He didn't say jack against Roseanne Barr and what she said. And then they come out, his spokesperson coming out and say how silent it is among the left for not going after Samantha. Well, silence seems to be the deal here on both sides. Your thoughts?
I mean, I feel like they're two different things. If you're upset about the use of the C word, that's a different conversation, what that means.
Well, what was your reaction? Should she be fired for it?
No, I don't think she should be fired for it. I think that comparing the history of Ivanka Trump's behaviors towards saying she's an advocate for women and yet standing by silently as the international gag rule is reimposed. As
okay,
the
well, that's a word used because you can live with this. Can you live with this? Should she be fired, Samantha B?
I actually believe Samantha B should be fired. I believe Roseanne Barr should be fired. And I'll tell you why I have issues with Samantha B. That word is vile in and of itself, but for someone in her position with a show, and her producers have some culpability here, because this was taped, this wasn't live TV like we're doing right now.
That's one of the bizarre pieces
and it
of
sets the bar low.
So they all agreed this will pass muster.
Yes, and you talk about the culture wars. This is where we are. We were talking about it in the break. We're at the lowest
Who
common
defined
denominator
decency
now.
downward in this country?
Donald Trump.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't think
break the tie here. Should
none of us
Samantha
would
be fired? Do people? Well, let me ask you a real reporter's question. Ready? Will the corporate power structure that decides these things come down on her or not?
Well, two things. The first thing is that if they fire her now, they'll look like they're getting rid of her in response to President Trump. That raises a whole other set of issues for the corporation. The second thing
You mean
is,
like they did with the football players?
Yeah. I mean, the corporation will have more criticism.
Anyway, here we go. The Washington Post, Philip Rucker, who's sits up here oftentimes, who covered Trump as a candidate in 2016, tweeted today, "For what it's worth, the word Samantha B used, that word today, and words such as that, was emblazoned on many a T-shirt worn and sold at Trump rallies throughout the 2016. Donald Trump." Look, a lot of what's said out there is just old Trump stuff. But that word I've heard, I never saw because I don't think the cameras would focus on it, TV cameras. Apparently went out and looked at it. Our producer showed it to me, was prevalent.
Yeah. Well, Chris,
and Trump never complained about it and said you shouldn't use that word. I'm sorry. Do you want to go back to you, Liz?
And I just want to add to that. Ted Nugent used that word against Hillary Clinton and was welcomed into the Oval Office.
He did.
So stop clutching your pearls.
But let's get back to the issue here. We have
that was a class statement, but it was pretty good. Go ahead. Stop clutching your pearls.
We have two prominent women who are comedians who both had a really bad week. The ape comment is a problem for the reasons Liz said. That has racial connotations that go back to our founding as a country and the slavery issue and how people saw Africans at that time that they were less smart, less attractive.
That was the biblical case for it.
Absolutely.
That basically they were born as stewards.
Absolutely. So to the question of what should be done, I actually think that the corporate pressure on TBS that has her?
Exactly.
I think they're going to have to get rid of her. ABC did the right thing, and they did it real quick. They didn't hesitate. They cut it off. It's just like Starbucks. Starbucks survived what they went through because they were real quick. Well, it comes down to constituency, everybody here, because I'm a little bit cynical about this. Which constituency? Racial, you offended 20% of the country, or 30% right off the bat. Right.
They're not going to like it. They're not going to go to Disneyland anymore, Orlando or California.
Right.
But this one, this offends
Don't forget
women.
Black
obviously.
Panther.
This women.
I think a lot. My other point is, I think a lot depends on who shows up to protest.
That's right.
What Samantha B said. I think
it's the constituencies.
Yeah.
If nobody shows up.
Nobody's going to protest.
If no one shows up. But I think in the case of Roseanne Barr, ABC could have looked at that and said, you can name 5 different groups that are going to start.
Okay, first of all, it was recidivism. She had done it before with Susan Rice, the same reference, the same animal connection, the same awful thing that you are so right. It goes back to the primordial racism of nature, practically, in this the Western civilization.
Absolutely.
Thank you. It justifies colonialism and all other kinds of things, right? Liz Winstead, thank you. Ted Johnson. This is a big stuff, and it's going to be a big conversation in this country this weekend. Sophia, wisdom, by the way. It means wisdom.